Hey guys, and welcome to episode number 10 of the official podcast of Development Unplugged. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about goals, in particular, interconnected goals, so that we make sure that all our goals are working together to get us to where we really want to be. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me give you a little bit of context. Development is a personal development system that talks about personality psychology, entrepreneurship. I mean, we talk about a lot of different things, but we do it in a very different way than what you've seen before. When we talk about personality psychology, when we talk about personality theory, we don't give you a test, we don't put you in a box, we don't limit you, we don't give you any set amount of personalities. We talk about how we all are a mix of all the different personalities. They're just some that are a little bit more natural for us than others. Stepping into certain roles, certain environments can either give us more energy or can drain us. And we discussed this idea of, extroverts, if they increase their social stimulus, they move more, they have more constant change, they're going to have more energy. Introverts, on the other hand, if they lower social stimulus, if they get a little bit more organization, structure in their lives, more tranquility, they will be able to charge the battery. That doesn't mean that introverts can't enjoy high social stimulus environments or vice versa. Everyone can enjoy every type of environment, but it is easier to do when you're in a recharged state where you have enough battery to step out of your comfort zone. So we don't buy any excuses like, I'm an introvert, I can't do public speaking, or, I'm an extrovert, I can't organize myself. Everyone can do anything they put their minds to, if and when they make sure to not rob themselves of the types of stimulus and the activities and the environments that fill them with energy. On the flip side, we also discuss how we don't want to use those environments as an escape, because if you're escaping into what we call regenerative spaces and spend extended periods of time there in an inefficient manner, that means there's something in your daily lives you're avoiding, and that has to be tackled. So we also talk about fears and insecurities. In particular, we talk about how having fears is okay. It can be healthy. It can save our lives. It's a very human basic instinct, and it can help us manage risk. But we also talk about how there are some fears that are irrational, that are unhealthy, that paralyze us, that freeze us, and that rob us of a lot of things that could enrich our lives. So we talk about how we want to make our goals more important than our fears. So we discuss many different things. We talk insecurities, we talk our internal battery, we talk connecting with other humans, communicating with other humans, with other personalities. We talk about how to increase emotional intelligence. We talk about how to improve empathy and understanding, and reducing conflicts from different that arise from having different instincts. And how do you work with other people? How do you have relationships with other people? How do you give what other people can receive and what they're looking for without losing yourself in the process? And how can you also receive kindness and generosity from other people, even if it's given in a different way than what you expect with your context? We also talk about how we want to contextualize everything when it comes to advice, when it comes to goals, when it comes to any process in your life. You want to contextualize it. So the more information you have about your current situation or the situation of the person you're helping, the more informed decisions you can make. And the more you take a one-size-fits-all approach to things, or have the mentality, this worked for this person, so it should work for me, kind of thing, the more you do that, the more failure you're going to have, because you're not really approaching it from the right angle. You're not really doing things that will work in that particular situation. So that also means at Development, we do not have any one-size-fits-all tools. We talk about taking into consideration your personality, your context, your goals, your passions, and in today's topic, we're talking in particular about goals. Again, who also are my business partners, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And this is an important topic. I mean, every topic we cover in development is important, but I think this is one of our favorite topics here.
Yeah, this is one that really ties into anything. It can be relationships. Okay, what are your long-term and short-term goals in a relationship? How do you make them work for you? In business, overcoming fears and insecurities. Really any area of your life that you're working on, that you want to develop, that you want to have success in, it's useful to start looking at, okay, what are your goals? Because a lot of the times we go forward without a lot of clarity. And I think it's okay to not have all the answers. We're not going to have all the answers before we do things. And sometimes we have to start acting before we get the answers. But having some sense, having even a vague sense of, okay, long term, this is what I want to achieve. This is the kind of situation I want to be in. And short term, these are the areas that I need to focus on. How do I make those work together so that the short-term goals are fueling me and driving me towards the long-term goals?
Yeah, when we talk about interconnected goals, we have to understand in personal development, sometimes there's this trend to push to being overly ambitious and thinking very long-term and not giving up and being patient and being perseverant. And I agree with all those things. However, one has to be careful, because when you make your goals so far off and you don't see enough progress, sometimes I give the example, imagine you want to be a millionaire, or imagine you want to have a million subscribers on YouTube or Instagram, right? It's going to take a while to get there. And you're going to get disappointed and feel stuck sometimes. You're going to feel like you're not getting enough progress. And what happens is progress inspires you. And if you feel stuck, that can kill certain motivation. It can kill certain drive. It can also affect your self-worth. And basically, I mean, picture this. A poor person who feels like they're advancing, they're growing, they're evolving, they're progressing, is going to be happier than the richest person in the world who feels stuck, who feels paralyzed, who feels like they're not advancing. Because one of the things that most fills us with energy, excitement, happiness is seeing progress. So we have to break down our goals, I mean, into stepping stones and milestones, not just making it super long term. So that's one thing. I mean, the value of having interconnected goals is I mean, there are many different areas where it helps. But one thing is you make sure to have smaller sub-projects within a big project where you will see progress, you will see advancements, and those advancements will fill you with energy, will fill you with excitement, and they will help you get to your long-term goal. But if you only set a long-term goal without having those smaller side projects or sub-projects that help fuel you, then you're not going to get to the final stage. And sometimes those sub-projects or side projects are literally just small little things that help recharge your battery. And they might seem like a distraction or irresponsible or being sidetracked, but in reality, it's things that might give you more energy, more focus, more context, more experience, and they aren't a distraction. They actually are things that provide value. So sometimes we get very stubborn and think, no, I have to focus on this. I cannot focus on these other things. And that happened to me in my previous business, where I cut out everything from video games, parties, relationships, sex, all my basic personal hobbies, because I felt they were a distraction and tried to work 22 hours a day. I even cut out sleep, basically. And that wasn't really healthy. And it didn't work because it generated a lot of fatigue, burnout, conflicts, because I didn't have as much mental clarity. So as we talk about in developed development, making space for regenerative spaces, those activities, those environments that fill us with energy and inner peace, those things should be part of your goals. They should be part of your interconnected goals. And sometimes it really is something that seems irresponsible and like being sidetracked. But if you make sure that it interconnects with the other goals, you can use it and channel it to fuel you and drive you. So that's something where we have to really think about that. How there are some things we don't give enough value and priority, and they really can provide that, what you really need. And then there's also the other side. Having interconnected goals keeps you focused. Because sometimes there's going to be things in your personal life, with your family, with your friends, with your relationship. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to challenge you and are going to get you off track. And you have to assess, will focusing on this short-term thing help me get to where I want to be long-term? Or will this distract me and maybe rob me from all these things that I'm trying to achieve? And one thing I sometimes ask myself when I have a difficult moment is I ask myself, will this affect me in 5 or 10 years? Yes or no? And then if it will, I give it more importance. If it doesn't, I kind of, okay, I'm not gonna get distracted with this. And sometimes when you ask yourself those questions and you reflect on how the now affects the future, that can really get you on track. It can help you focus. It can help you take a more logical, pragmatic, conscious approach to the situation, and it can save you from a lot of unnecessary stress, a lot of unnecessary distraction. So having the goals interconnected, it's all about keeping you on track, but also making space for all those things you desire on your day-to-day life, but making sure that they're contributing to where you want to go.
Yeah. No, because it's a trap that a lot of us fall into, that we have our long-term goals clear and we just are so focused on those that we forget to live. You know, how many of us don't spend time with the people that we care about? We don't invest time in our hobbies, the things that fill us with joy. Exactly, because we're so focused on that grind of trying to reach the long term. You know, eventually I'll be happy. If I do this and achieve this, then I can be happy. But no, interconnected goals is realizing, okay, how about short term being happy should be one of your goals, and long term being happy should also be one of your goals. And also sometimes we mix up our long-term goals with our short-term goals when we don't have clarity of them, in the sense of, you know, for example, I want to be a millionaire. We set that as our only goal and we want it to happen overnight. And we can get so stressed and so uncomfortable and so feeling so insecure, feeling bad about ourselves. You know, we go on Facebook, we see all our friends achieving all these great things. We see all their highlights and we're like, but I'm not a millionaire yet, or but I'm not super fit yet, or but I'm not married and I don't have kids yet. You know, so by having clarity of both our long-term and short-term goals and how they feed into each other, we don't get as stuck on, I haven't done this yet, so I'm not worthy yet.
Yeah, and another thing we do is we mix up dreams with goals. We have this big dream, but we are not doing anything to achieve it, to become it, to bring it into our lives. We are not willing to change our lives, change anything around us to achieve it. So we are dreaming and hoping it will fall from the sky or the sea will part and suddenly you will have whatever you're dreaming about. And life is not often like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it happens. I believe in miracles. I believe in good luck, whatever. But you do have to set an intention and change the things that have to be changed for you to achieve your goals. When you make it a goal, you set up your life and change whatever it requires for you to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you definitely have to take action to start making things happen. And I think if you have clarity about, okay, long term, this is what I want to achieve. Short term, then what do I have to actually do? What actions do I actually have to take to start making that happen? It's a very different mindset from just, this is what I want. So
I'm hoping it will fall from the sky.
Yeah, and as Jannik said, sometimes we're going to be in difficult situations that are going to start taking us slightly off track. Part of my personality really needs to move around a lot and go on adventures and do different things and new things and move and feel like I'm doing more than just sitting around. And right now I'm actually recovering, finally doing really well. But, you know, for about a month or so, I couldn't walk very consistently because I injured both of my knees. It was extremely stressful. It was extremely stressful for me. It took such a big toll on my mood, on my everything, because I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. And long term, I do want to work out. I do want to get really fit. It's something that I've recently gotten into. And so suddenly feeling like I've got this big setback and losing something that I'm working on, losing something that I've just gotten passionate about, right as I've gotten passionate about it, it was such a hard hit for me. But the moment I sat down and looked at, okay, what are my goals long term? Okay, I want to get fit. I want to be happy. I want to have a good life where I'm with people that I care about. Short term, what do I have to do to make that happen? I need to rest. I need to actually heal and rest so that I can get better and start acting towards that. Because my instinct sometimes is to push through, like, oh yeah, sure, I'm injured, but I'm gonna do things anyway. And sometimes there's a time and place for that. There's definitely a time and place for pushing through. But in this case, it was very clear that I also needed to actually let my body heal.
I mean, and that's what where the question comes in. You know, will this matter in 5 years? Yes or no? Will my decisions right now affect me in the future, and if so, how? And that's where you will know, okay, in this case, I mean, the show must go on, I gotta push through. And other times it's, no, I need to rest now to have the well-being, the mental clarity, the energy, just make sure that all the conditions are right to be able to start that next chapter or hit the ground running when you're recovered, right? So we have to make sure to identify, okay, this is where I want to be, this is where I'm right now. What short-term goals can I set in place, set in motion that will help me with what I need right now, but also will get me on track and even maybe accelerate or improve the quality of what I want to achieve long-term.
Yeah, because you could have got lost completely and forget where you were going.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was at a point where I was starting to forget about my long-term goals because I was so upset about the immediate situation. And so I was kind of resting physically, but I wasn't resting emotionally and mentally because I was in that place of, oh shit, my life has just gone completely off track. What's happening? So yeah, reminding yourself once in a while, like each one of us will have different moments in our life where things are changing or shifting, or we feel like we're losing focus or we're burning out. And those are good times to sit and go, okay, what are my long-term goals? And what are my short-term goals? And it's okay if your long-term goal is just, I want to be happy. Because you're still going to be looking at, okay, what are the short-term actions and short-term goals that I need to implement to make that happen?
I would actually disagree there.
Okay.
Because I see mothers, for example, they are always fixing the small things. And they forget that maybe their goal should be that their children become independent.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, okay, this will make me happy because I fix it fast, and then we keep on going. And then they are surprised that their children get divorced and come back home because you haven't given them the life skills they need to be independent.
Yeah.
So they will be grown-ups with children depending on you.
Yeah.
And you do the same with your employees or your colleagues.
Yeah.
You are there solving problems immediately. Okay, I'm better at this. I will solve it. Oh, I'll do it faster. I solve. And you become a problem solver. And where are your goals?
Yeah, I think I'm going to add a word to what I said. Maybe not just being happy, but being sustainably happy. Because there's a difference. Being happy is just doing right now what will make me happy right now, whether or not it's sustainable long term. Sustainably happy is actually setting up a life that works.
Yeah,
and I mean,
I like it because you're not just fixing problems. You are really going for something that is grander, more grandiose. And I think that should be whatever you set up as your long-term goal and your short-term goal, it should be grandiose. Bigger than you think is achievable.
It has to be an evolution. It has to be a growth.
Yeah.
It has to be somewhere where you grow both personally, it can be romantically, it can be emotionally, it can be financially. I mean, it can be many different areas and ideally a combination of all of them. But you have to see that growth, right? And you have to have enough confidence and curiosity. I think curiosity is a good one to make sure that you're pushing beyond your comfort zone.
Yeah,
exactly.
And this is where we talk about fears, something we talk about in every episode. We all have fears. Fears are healthy sometimes. They save our lives sometimes. They keep us out of danger. But sometimes they paralyze us. Sometimes they freeze us. Sometimes they rob us from experiences that will enrich our lives. and sometimes they help us deteriorate relationships because we're afraid of sometimes commitment, afraid of rejection, sometimes we're afraid of judgment, sometimes we're afraid. So it can deteriorate many different areas of our lives. Also, we can end up rejecting ourselves prematurely in sales. How many times do we assume our client doesn't want to buy something without giving them a chance? So fear of rejection, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is that feeling that you aren't qualified, you aren't ready, you don't have the experience, you don't have the papers, you are a fraud and you are faking it till you make it, and someday someone is gonna discover that you're a fraud, and that even happens to the most successful actors, CEOs, investors. I mean, very, very rich and successful people. They sometimes, when they've had certain level of success, and sometimes in from their perspective they feel they got lucky, they might devalue their worth, they might devalue their impact. So fears can affect us a lot, and we have to be careful to not give more power to our fears than to our goals. And what we talk about there is we have to make our goals more important than our fears, because really fears are valuable, they're important when they are there to save our lives, when they're there to make sure we improve our quality of work. I mean, I have improved the quality of many things I do at work because of fear of failure, but I channeled that into innovation and quality control instead of giving up. But there have been many points where I've been very close to giving up because I've been like, I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't talk about this, I can't do that. And I've kind of wanted to give up many times, but obviously I made one very key decision. My goals are more important than my fears. The kind of the mission and the purpose of developed development is more important than my personal fears. So that doesn't mean I have eliminated all my fears. I wake up every day with insecurities, with challenges. Sometimes I have anxiety. Sometimes I overthink things. I have very defined this great ability to overthink the consequences of every little thing. But I don't stop myself. I continue pushing through. And that is something relevant to talk about when we talk about reaching your goals. Sometimes it's facing those fears. Sometimes it's eliminating fears. In developed development, we have many different workshops where we have courses. We have a lot of content focused on doing different exercises and implementing certain activities in your life where you start eliminating certain goals. You start desensitizing yourself to eliminating certain fears. Yes.
Maybe some goals that are not working for you.
Oh yeah, no, that
sure.
can be relevant too.
Yeah.
That can be relevant too, because sometimes we have certain goals that aren't even really things that we really want, but maybe it's what our parents wanted for us, or maybe it's what we feel society expects of us, or maybe it's what we feel we should do in order to fill certain standards of what it means to be successful. So yeah, if we have goals that aren't at all aligned with what we truly want, then it's worth eliminating some of those.
I mean, we have an awesome exercise in the 5-day mastery class. That where you really put down all your different personal projects, and you reflect on, how easy is it, how much fun are you having, how much have you advanced. You reflect on many different things, and you kind of go reviewing all your projects. And many times people realize, oh, this one is not near as important as I thought. Or this one is not as fun, and this one is difficult, and this requires more energy, this requires rearranging certain things, and it can help us get unstuck. And the reality is, sometimes you have to filter through the noise, because sometimes you realize this is actually my father's goal for me, or this is my mother's goal for me, or this is my partner's goal for me, or this is my... my boss's goals from me, and it's not really that important for me, so maybe I should make it less important in my personal scale. Oh, this thing I haven't given much importance, but actually it's more important now that I reflect on it. I should give it more time and invest a little bit more in this. Oh, this thing right here, right now I'm not having fun with it. Maybe I can change the approach and suddenly make it more fun. So we do a lot of different things with goals and projects to filter out all the projects that really aren't important, aren't fulfilling us, really are distraction. We also have exercises to figure out, oh, this requires more focus, more investment, and we filter that noise. And that's something that when we run on autopilot in our day-to-day lives, we forget to do that.
Yeah.
We forget to do that, and something I do with the business and with my personal life is often I have to sit down and reflect on all the things we're working on and rearrange what is getting most priority, or this is not working, this I need to change, I need to change the approach here. Sometimes we're using the wrong personality because we have this idea that, oh, I have to be more extroverted, more introverted, more like this to achieve this. And sometimes we force a certain way of being. Well, sometimes we have to be agile and adapt to what's required. Sometimes because of insecurities, we adapt too much and it becomes unsustainable and difficult, unnecessarily so. So that's something we have to look at as well. You know, how do you filter all that noise, and how do you define the goals that really are most important, and how do you rearrange things to get back on track?
Yeah.
And sometimes there are goals that are very, very important, but you're banging your head against the keyboard and you're stuck and you can't advance on that. And sometimes the best thing to do is also, okay, I'm gonna take a little break with this and I'm gonna go over to this thing that's much less important in the long run, but short term it's more important because it'll fill me with energy, it'll fill me with happiness, it'll make me feel successful, and it'll get back on track. That's something here at the office. We do it a lot.
Yeah.
When we see someone get stuck, it's like, okay, don't worry, I'm going to give you another assignment. We got to work on this, we got to do this. And I get them excited about something new and different and redirect their energy. And then they see very fast advancements, very fast progress, because I probably give them something relatively easy, but challenging enough to be fun and where they feel accomplished. And then it's like, ooh, okay. And then they get back to the more challenging thing, but with more... you know, with more mental clarity, with more motivation, with just a whole better mental, emotional state, and then things start running again and flowing again. So that's
well, in English you have the saying, "Give me a break." Occasionally you need that break. Occasionally you need to take a break just to charge up again.
Yeah, no, the same way that sleep allows the body to focus on recovering certain aspects of your body physically, also mentally and emotionally, we need certain breaks where we can sort of realign things. And how many of us haven't had this situation where we're so in a project, we're working on it day and night, we think about it, we dream about it, we talk about it with everyone, we're so invested in it, but we're not making the progress we want to see. There's something that we feel is missing, or there's something we're stuck on. And then either thanks to ourselves or thanks to someone else who kind of pushes us along, we get distracted at some point. We go out, we do something different, and then that thing we see across the street, or that conversation we have with a friend that we weren't going to see but who was stubborn enough to make us go see them, something gives us that next idea that helps us with that original project. So that's another thing when we're looking at interconnected goals. It's not just categorizing like, oh, these are my interconnected goals in my finances, and I'm not going to look at the rest of my life, because your relationships are going to affect your finances.
Absolutely.
Your health is going to affect your finances. Your emotional well-being is going to affect your finances. All your areas of your life are going to be influencing each other. So if you have the long-term goal of, I want to reach this, you have to look at all the areas of your life that are ultimately going to affect that.
Yeah, and another thing you have to look at is patience.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes if you really want to get to where you really want to get, you got to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
Most major changes, most major upgrades in your life take longer time than you expect.
Mm-hmm.
Take more investment, more practice, more failure. You have to embrace failure. You have to be open to fall. You have to be open to get rejected. As we say in developed development, if you're not failing, if you're not getting rejected, you're not innovating. You're not stepping out of your comfort zone. So you have to embrace that. But also you have to understand that sometimes the things that you very urgently want, but that really are a distraction or will affect your finances or your emotional state in a way that you just can't afford in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta sometimes have the patience and just kind of peace of mind of knowing, you know, this is where I'm going. I don't need to be there right now. I don't need to be there right now. As long as I keep making strides to get there, I'm happy and I feel like I'm already achieving some of it.
Exactly.
So, like, for example, being an entrepreneur, I make a lot of sacrifices in my personal life. But a lot of sacrifices in my personal life that help me get to where I want to be long term.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have to find the right balance, because sometimes I've made stupid sacrifices, unnecessary sacrifices, and I've robbed myself of a lot of activities that fill me with energy, fill me with drive, fill me with passion, and that's unhealthy. That's not what we are saying here. But sometimes you got to be like, okay, I would like this, I would really enjoy this, but if I wait a year, 5 years, 10 years, then I'm going to be able to do it with much more ease. I'm going to be able to enjoy it more. I'm going to be able to implement it in a way that makes much more sense. That's not forced. I mean, it's like those people who want to get married so urgently, and they're pushing and pushing to get married, and they're rushing getting married, they're rushing having kids before they have the relationship stability, before they have the financial stability to really have the family life dynamic that they really dream of.
Yeah.
And they try to force it. And then they get divorced and they have an unhealthy relationship. They can't give the kids all the things they want to give the kids. And then they feel like a failure because they rushed into it, right? And sometimes like, okay, this is what I'm going towards. I want to have this family dynamic. I want to have the resources to send my kids to certain schools. I want to have certain stability in a relationship. So, okay, have the patience to get there. Have the patience to build it. Don't force it, because and this is where insecurities come in. If you don't have the confidence to know you can create the life you want, you will settle for the life you can get according to your insecurities.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of people settling in their careers and their and sometimes careers that they don't want because it's the safe job. And you have to understand, especially when you're younger, you can take more risks, you can take more time. We live at an age where we're living longer than any point in history. I mean, the average age where people die now is, depending on the country, 85, 90, 95. So, I mean, and there are a lot of people that are over 100 years old, right? So our lives are generally longer, and people's ability to work also is generally longer than what it was before.
And we are healthier.
We are
and
healthier
smarter.
because of the medicines and the healthcare. Well, there are still many challenges in the healthcare systems around the world. Every day, fewer people are dying. Fewer people are curing more illnesses. So we can take more time. Women can have kids at much older ages now because the healthcare system can help with many different approaches. I mean, our aunt and uncle, they just had a kid at around 50 years old, both of them. Very healthy kid.
Super sweet.
I mean, so we have more time than what our parents and our grandparents and the great-grandparents had. And we are still instilled and imposed with a lot of the fears from previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a luxury now in this point in history that no other generation before us had.
Mm-hmm.
We have more time. Yes, our time is limited. Yes, I know in personal development people talk about you're gonna die and one day you're not gonna be here, so you gotta make every moment matter. Sure, I understand that narrative, but you also have to be aware of sometimes you have to take more time to do things the right way to have the experiences you truly want, and not rush things and not force things out of desperation. And sometimes those narratives that sadly are very popular in personal development generate fear. They generate impulsivity. They generate a situation where people force certain things, they push certain things with such insistence that they're not really calculating their actions.
Yeah.
No, and if your goal is important enough and you have clarity, you don't settle. I remember it took me 7 years of marriage before I had my children, the two of you, because I didn't want to have children before I had the house, the garden, the car, whatever. So you would have space. For me, it's very important. Space is one of my personalities require a lot of space. So I wanted, if I had children, I would give them space. I had a health problem. I didn't know how long I would be fertile because I had I'm missing one of my ovaries and the other one has had problems. So I didn't know if I could have children and how long would I be fertile. But I would not bring children to this world if I could not give them what I thought was basic space. And I'm very glad I did. I'm very glad I had plan A and B and C. Okay, if I didn't have children, I would like to have a dog and other things. I mean, it sounds maybe mean to say compare a dog to a child, but I
For a
knew
lot
I
of
could
people,
give.
for a lot of people, their dogs are their children.
Yeah.
And I knew I needed to give love to somebody, and I have managed to not only bring up two children, but I have adopted other children for small or long periods of time, some of them, because I knew I had this love to give, and I knew I had this ability, but I had other plans. So if this didn't work, I knew it would not be the end of the world. And I think that's also very important, that you set up goals where you really of something you want, but you're willing to move or do a pivot or change it when it's not working for you for some reason.
Yeah.
But see what is behind. I wanted to be a mother because I knew I could educate them. I'm a Montessori teacher. I have worked with kids all my life. I like them. But it didn't have to be that way. I just knew I had this need to give and to educate.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to this idea of making your goals sustainable. Both of your points go into that, because sometimes we either have a goal that's so specific that we can't enjoy the surprises that come along the way, oftentimes positive surprises that come along the way, because they don't look exactly like that goal we had. Or we get into that desperation from insecurities and whatnot, where it's like, okay, I gotta live now, only now, and then it's not sustainable. And I know for me, I've had times in my life where financially I was doing really, really well, but I knew it wasn't sustainable because I didn't have the business to support it. I didn't have the structure to support it. I didn't have the lifestyle to support it. I wasn't even, I was living in a place where I had a visa that was about to expire, and, I didn't have a official business registered that would, support a future visa. Like, I was really hanging by threads. I was doing well, but in the moment and without a sustainable future. And so when you're looking at your long-term goals, you want to look at, okay, how can I create a life that's actually sustainable? If I want to improve my finances, how can I do it in a way that's sustainable? If I want to be more happy, how can I do it in a way that's sustainable? If I want to be more anything, if I want to achieve anything, how can I do it in a way that's more sustainable?
We talked about this in one of the episodes about entrepreneurship and leadership and such. I don't remember which one because we've had a few episodes on those topics. But sometimes you gotta know when to push through certain moments of discomfort, and sometimes you gotta know when to launch. Like, within the context of business, the narrative was sometimes you need to accept the fact that something isn't ready to launch and take more time and build up the infrastructure. And sometimes you gotta start something that's not perfect and launch it as a minimum viable product, a product that's okay enough to launch, but still needs much more investment, much more development. And with your personal life, you have to look at that too. This area of my life, do I need to slow down, breathe, reflect, organize, invest in infrastructure, invest in the basics? Or am I so close that I need to take this step and I can keep pushing through those moments of insecurity, through the judgment, through the rejection? And that can be a little bit challenging because there are moments where it's like, no, we have to reevaluate all of this. We got to rebuild all of this. We cannot sustain this. The infrastructure is not there. This will crash. And there's also those moments where, okay, I'm not quite ready yet, but I got to take the leap.
Yeah.
And you got to know when to take the leap and when you got to, okay, no, I got to develop a little bit further. I need to prepare a little bit more. I gotta take a little bit more time on this.
And you have to see if there's insecurities behind.
Oh yeah, there will
Either
be. There will be.
Taking the leap or taking longer, because sometimes we use perfectionism to stop.
Yes, that's going to an extreme of waiting. I mean, most people don't realize this, but it is a case of, like, if you are a perfectionist, many times what you really are doing is you're avoiding the possibility of being rejected, the possibility of being judged, the possibility of it not failing, and that can cause a lot of problems if you are postponing everything. And that happened to me in the early days of running my first business. It was like, this is not ready, and I basically would build a very good platform, a very good website, and then when I would start from scratch, and I would build a very good website, and I would start from scratch. I would find one thing that wasn't good enough, and I would rebuild the whole thing. And while a certain period of that was very valuable because I obviously improved my skills, I learned a lot during that, there was certainly a point where I had gone beyond that growth period, and now I was just postponing stuff out of fear. And one day I had to decide, okay, it will never be ready. This is going to be a constant evolution. It's never going to be ready. The question is it ready enough to start, to launch, and then go from there? And that's something in our lives. We have to reflect, when are we letting our fears stop us? And when are we letting our fears guide us to make sure we're making wiser choices?
Yeah.
And we have to be very, very, very self-aware, very, very critical with ourselves, and not accept any lies we tell ourselves, because we're very good at justifying things.
So maybe the invitation after today's podcast would be, get to know you. Get to know when you're acting from fear and when you're not getting. Make that one of your goals. And I do it all the time. I do stop and examine, okay, what are my motivations behind this? Why am I saying this is my desire? Because it happened to me some years ago. The children had moved away. Jannik was living in Vancouver. Itzel was living in Japan. And we were living in Canada, in Bedford, in
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. And my ex was about to retire. And we had decided that our dream was to live in Acapulco, in a beautiful condo we have with the most beautiful view, in one of the most beautiful views in the world, a beautiful swimming pool. And I would finish my dissertation for my PhD. I had a couple of books that very important European publishers wanted. They were ready. I just had to clean it a little, change a few things. And I'm also a painter, and I wanted to return to my paintings. So it sounded like the ideal life we were creating. And 15 days, I remember it was about the 15th day of being in the swimming pool, doing those things that I thought I had dreamed of. And I was like, oops, these are not my dreams. I don't need a PhD. I don't want the life of an academic. That's my ex-husband's, at the time, my husband's dream. I don't want to live in Acapulco full time. That's my father's dream. And I started to realize all these things I had set up, they are not my dreams. Help! I need to travel. I need to do things. I need to meet new people. And it was like, what do I do now? And then is when I realized that for a long time, I had stopped dreaming and making my own goals, setting my own goals. And it was like panic mode. I need to set up new goals, and I really had to find out first, what do I want and what are my motivations behind. And since then, I can tell you my life has taken a lot of turns, but my life is my own. Now I'm designing my own life, and finally I'm able to see myself and what I really want, and I don't forget other people. I don't forget my children.
That's an important point. I mean, when you define goals, everything we talk about in development, it goes two ways. I mean, it's what do we need, and what can we share with others. And we talk about this, you know, when you're on a plane, what's the first thing they tell you? They tell you, if the cabin pressure goes down, put the oxygen mask on yourself, and then on the people you're taking care of. Because if you start right away with the people you're taking care of, but don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, you risk death. You risk running out of oxygen yourself before you can help people. And in our daily lives, many times we almost run out of oxygen because we are helping everyone else and we don't help ourselves. And sometimes we're judged, oh, you're being selfish, you're being this, you're being that. Sure, there are many people in this world who are selfish, many times due to insecurities. But understand that sometimes selfish acts can be generous acts. You know, if I do certain things for myself and I improve my emotional well-being, my personal finances, my personal resources, if I just feel better, I'm going to be a better leader. I'll be more generous. I'll have more to give. So we have to be aware of, yes, we got to make sure that we're giving ourselves what we need. We got to define our goals. We got to give ourselves our regenerative spaces. We got to give ourselves priority. We got to give ourselves value. But that should be our base. And then we have to talk about how do we connect with the world? How do we generate healthy relationships? How do we generate healthy alliances? How do we live in a world with other people with different needs, different insecurities, different contexts, different goals, different personalities? And yes, that point, you know, where you say, you know, you found all these things that were for you, but you didn't forget the people around you. You didn't forget to include people. And that's one thing in personal development. Many times they tell you, choose for you, do for you, do you. And they do it to such an extreme that you should only do it for you. And people get stuck. And I've seen a lot of people go through their personal development journeys where they go through a confidence boost. And in the beginning, it's exciting. And then they start getting a certain false arrogance and start putting people down and having a superiority complex of, I am more enlightened, I am more conscious, I am more this, I am more that, because I do this thing or that thing, I am better than you. Sometimes they say it literally, sometimes they say it with actions. And it's very important that the mentality should be like, no, I'm going to give myself, you know, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to make sure that I'm in a good state emotionally, financially, mentally, etc., so that I have more to give, more to share, so that we all win, so that we all have a richer life, so that I can uplift people, so I have the confidence to be resilient, so I have the confidence to uplift people. And Steve is coming into frame. Here, have mine.
I feel like, hello, I'm Steve. I just got dressed, but
he has pajama pants on underneath.
But yeah, I changed my playetta. I feel like you're kind of subliminally soliciting an experience of mine where there's a little bit of background story. I was in a relationship that wasn't the greatest. I did work for the previous business that Jannik mentions a lot, and that relationship kind of took me out of that business, and I thought I was moving forward, but it really brought a lot of things back, and I was living other people's goals and things like that. But during the course of the 2 years, I'd seen things go down. The quality of my life went down. It wasn't the best, and eventually I saw the forest for the trees, as they say, and I was able to get out of it. Luckily, by then, somebody had a plan already worked out, because sometimes he can tell the future. And he said, okay, this is what I want for you. This is, I think, kind of what you want for yourself, or at least that there was some commonalities there and that we could work to make that, make some of my goals a reality. And one of those was not living in a place with minus 30 degree winters, as well as having the freedom and the ability to explore things that I was passionate about, which is basically a lot of tech stuff and breaking stuff and computers. And with the life I was living at the time, I didn't really have that ability, but I had some roadblocks and I had to take care of those. So I'm not very good at moderation. That's not a word that's really in my vocabulary. I'm either not doing something or I'm doing 100% of it all the time.
You're not really in frame, by the way.
Oh, I thought
I'm seeing on the video he's not in frame. I'm going to bring him in frame, or he's going to move the camera so that... Here, come over here.
Very Canadian with the pajama pants.
Okay. And so I had longer term goals, which was to, oh geez, what the hell were they? Let's see, I did like that. So I had some longer term goals, which was to basically have a lot of fun and do a lot of experimenting and become much better with tech and travel,
Learn languages.
and just be a lot more happy in areas that I have fun with.
I'll give a little bit of context. So, Steve, for those of you who don't know him, he's our CTO. He's the guy in charge of tech here at Develop Development. He's the one who's on cameras, managing all the controls for the streams, also works on websites for us and things like that. And our friendship started because we both were nerds. We both were into computers. We both were into tinkering with stuff, breaking stuff, fixing stuff. And we came from totally different contexts, totally different backgrounds. But we both had certain commonality there. And ever since I've known Steve, he's a very, very ambitious person who's always tried to expand his knowledge, tried to learn more, tried to change his reality. But he's also had a lot of societal influences that have kind of pulled him down, distracted him over the course of many years. And many times we would get him on track. He would get a fantastic job. He would get, he would start going up, and then a lot of distractions, a lot of both people and experiences and goals, some of them his, some of them not really his, would kind of get him sidetracked. And there was a lot of noise. And I think as his friend, one of my biggest challenges has been being patient with him when he got sidetracked, but also being ready to be there for him to get him back on track. So that's what he's referring to when a few years ago, when our previous business, there were some challenges and he had some people pulling him in certain directions, and he did go in those directions, and then he realized things were maybe not the way he really wanted them to be, and then getting back on track was a challenge. But I think the moment you made certain decisions, things moved quickly.
Yeah. So that's more or less the backstory. So I was working 4 or 5 jobs at the same time. I was doing landscaping. I was doing property management. I was doing web design. I had a full-time job at McDonald's. I basically wasn't sleeping, and I was trying to maintain a relationship, which was really difficult. And I had to figure out what it is that I wanted and how I had to get there. And I'm not very good at maintaining a certain speed. Like I said, moderation isn't really my thing. So I decided that the long term was important, and so sacrificing the short term made sense. So I started working nights because I was actually working at McDonald's, and they needed a manager at a different store, but they needed the manager during the nighttime. And so I took that because that was a big bump in pay. And at the time, I actually had a big debt to the Canadian Revenue Agency. I had to pay them $10,000 or something like that. And
Because of short-term decision making.
yeah, that's definitely it. So yeah, I owed the CRA $10,000, and they decided that they were just going to take it. So they started chopping off 30% of my income after taxes. So before I became a manager, I was making $250 after they took their 30% for 2 weeks worth of work, which was ridiculous because I still had rent to pay and groceries to buy and all that stuff. So it made sense for me to become the nighttime manager of a different McDonald's so that I could have that bump in pay. And then at that point, I was making, for about 80, 90 hours of work every 2 weeks, I was taking home about $600. And that was really financially stressful because, rent. I don't know if anybody knows much about Canada, but it's friggin' expensive. Rent, food, transport, all of those things. And I was still, during the daytime, working as a web developer. So I had partnerships with people that I was working with, and we had clients to answer to. And so I built a routine, and it was, I'd wake up at 8 p.m. I'd get to work for 9 p.m. I'd work from 9:30 until 6 or 7 in the morning. I would go back to my place. I would work on projects until about 1 o'clock, and then I would go to sleep. And I did that for like 13 months. Now, if you ask any of my friends at the time, they'll tell you they saw very little of me, and I'm a very social creature. And so there was some benefits, but there was also a lot of damage done. People felt like I was ignoring them. People felt like I wasn't their friend anymore, or that they've done something to piss me off and that I didn't want to talk to them. When in reality, I just had to step back and focus on what I needed to do. And in 13 months, I was able to get that big debt paid off. But it was extremely stressful. It was super stressful. I had bags under my eyes all the time. I mean, I still do, but they were worse.
And you lost a lot of weight.
I lost a lot of weight. I was down to about 135 pounds. And this came right after my mother had gotten sick with cancer and passed away. And that was extremely stressful. And I became sick. And like for comparison, I'm at 175 pounds now. So I was like 60 kilograms. Now I'm 75 or whatever it is. And I feel and I look much healthier. Still not getting the right amount of sleep, but that's because of other things. But the long and short of it is I sacrificed a lot of short term to secure a lot of long term, or at least some long term. And I'm not quite sure I did it the right way. I mean, I kind of achieved what I set out for, but did I need to inflict as much collateral damage as I did?
I think based on the context you had in that moment, I think you did very well. I mean, obviously, I've known you since we were teenagers, right? So I've seen the decisions you made, and I think you made a very, very good call. You made yourself a priority. You decided to do certain things to get to where you wanted to be. In retrospect, can you learn from how you approached it? Yes. Could you have done certain things differently? Yes. But I think when we talk about personal development, there's a big danger. The more you learn about yourself, your decision making, your process, the more you wish you could go back and do things differently. The more you go, oh, had I known this then, I would have done it differently.
Well, hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah. No, and you have to be careful with that, because you cannot go back and change the past. You can only really work on the now and work on the future. And I think when you look at the past, celebrate the successes and learn from the mistakes. And I will say, overall, I think you had more success than you had mistakes during that period. And with the context you had in that moment, I think that's commendable. I mean, you were going through a loss of your mother. You were going through a very difficult relationship. You were going through financial strain. You were going through a lot of different challenges. And you pushed through, and you kept with perseverance, with dedication, with a mission, and you didn't stop. You didn't get distracted. And I actually
look where
commend
you
for
are
that,
now.
because it would have been very easy for you to have listened to all the drama and all the, oh, you don't care about me anymore, you've abandoned me, blah, blah, blah. And for many years, you used to do that. And for many years, every time you used to make yourself important, invested in yourself, started doing things for yourself, every time someone would kind of come with those type of narratives, you would run right back to them. And this is the first time in your life you didn't do that. And I think that's something you have to be aware of. If you catch yourself every time you're on the rise, getting distracted with all the people who are tearing you down, and sometimes they do it because they themselves want to keep you at their level. Sometimes they do it because they have legitimate needs and desires. It's not about invalidating them. But as my mother said, sometimes you have to do things for yourself first and then look at how to include people. And yes, there's sometimes a period. And I'm the same. I mean, I have a lot of friends. I've gone to school in many different countries. I've traveled a lot, and generally speaking, when I move, I'm not the best at keeping in touch. I would say you send postcards back to Canada. You have constant conversations and phone calls with family members, and you're constantly in touch with friends. I myself, I don't.
If it's not in front of you, it doesn't exist.
Like, no, it's not that it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
But it's just, I don't feel that same responsibility that you feel. Obviously, I have a different set of personalities. I had different context. And I also come from a family that is more independent emotionally, where people live all over the world. I mean, for most of our adult life, my sister lived in Japan. I lived in one side of Canada. My parents lived in another side of Canada. Now our dad lives in Denmark. I mean, so we're used to that context. You obviously have a different context. And that's another thing when we talk about personal development, when we talk about ideal ways of approaching things, understand that different contexts lead to very different things. So in the case of Steve, he had a very different context than what I had. But I will say, I think those decisions you made were very commendable and worth those risks. And I also will say something. It can maybe sound a little controversial because I know some personalities need more attention and more constant support than others. But I think good friends are there for you no matter what.
And I had those.
And you did. And those are really the friendships that I value the most. Because, for example, I know we've gone years apart without talking. But the moment we're in the same place or with the same project, I mean, we know we can depend on each other for anything. The same, I have friends in Denmark. I know 10 years in, I land in Denmark. I call a friend. I now have a place to stay. I know I have someone who has my back, who's excited to see me, even if you haven't spoken in 10 years, right? So I think good friendships will push you and encourage you during those moments where you're investing in yourself. And not so good friendships will try to tear you down during those moments where you are growing. I understand that there's an in-between point where people are like, I want to be included in your process. And it's not that I'm trying to tear you down. I want to be included. And there, sometimes you have the emotional agility. You have enough resources. You have enough time to include them. And sometimes you don't. And there, sure, if you have enough understanding of the situation, you will be able to communicate that. And I think maybe in retrospect, maybe you would have been able to communicate certain things better, but I certainly wouldn't have changed much about your decision making in that period, because I think you did way better than most people would have under those circumstances.
And something I want to add, not everybody is a forever person. Some will accompany you for few months, some of them for years, but they are not your responsibility. Their happiness is not your responsibility. If you are nice to them, if you are there for them when it really counts, then you've done your best. And you can only do your best. And they have, the way you accept them, the way they are, they should accept your process and understand. Now, breaking away from what you broke away and what you are achieving now and the life you're living now, I think it was worth it. It was worth it. And the people that really love you will be able to see it and also change their mind about you.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely, without a doubt, worth it. There's no doubts there. And so I think we're all kind of on the same page. But what's interesting is that the perspective I had looking back at the choices that I made within the context of the goals I was trying to reach, I felt like maybe I didn't execute it very well because I was there in the moment, so I remember every detail and what was going on.
And sometimes you have to make people uncomfortable. Somebody has to break through. Somebody has to get out of the comfort zone so other people know that's possible. In the process, a lot of people will be uncomfortable. Yeah, and be aware of that. You have to make people uncomfortable. When you're choosing for yourself, when you're choosing something more grandiose, you will make people uncomfortable.
No, and even you yourself will go through certain periods of discomfort. Like, if you really want to create sustainable happiness, yes, there will be times when it's really stressful and really tough. If you expect the whole way, and I'm not saying that you do, but I know some people do, if you're expecting the whole way to be lined with roses and super fun and super comfortable all the time, you're not really fully invested and you're not taking enough risk. We sometimes say this in the context of if you're not failing, it's because you're not taking enough risks. But the same goes with comfort levels. If you're not uncomfortable sometimes, you're not really literally stepping out of your comfort zone. So yeah, sometimes you do have to make sacrifices. And I think the sacrifices you made a lot of sense for what you wanted to achieve long term, because you didn't stay stuck there. That's the difference. Some people will make those sacrifices, but they'll make those sacrifices for the rest of their lives and not with the focus that you had on, okay, this is what I want to achieve long term, and this is why I'm doing this. But you said, okay, this is what I want to achieve long term, so that's why it's worth it short term to be really stressed and really uncomfortable for a period of time, if after that period of time a lot of things are going to be a lot better.
And something Jannik and I were talking some days ago, it has been very intense for us. I think Itzel talks about her niece. I perceive a lot of things that I perceive a lot. And the last few weeks have been very intense for Jannik, Itzel, and me. We had health problems. We had all kind of weird things happening. And Jannik was saying, I'm glad we are talking about interconnected goals, because sometimes when you are about to move to the next level, it gets so tough. That is nice to know, and we should talk about it during the program. So I'll remind it now. Sometimes when you're about to go to the next level, as if it was a computer game, it will get so tough because you're breaking through your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it gets bigger and bigger, your comfort zone, the more you learn things, the more you apply the tools you learn in personal development or anything else. But it's still a comfort zone. And you have to break through. And when you're about to break through the comfort zone, when you're about to break through to the next level, it gets so intense and people get so uncomfortable around you.
Yeah, because that's the situation where you pretty much don't know what you're doing, in the sense that you haven't done it before.
That has never happened to us.
When you're in your comfort zone, it means that you're doing things you've already done before. You're talking to people you've already talked with. You're living in a certain level of routine. You kind of know your way around stuff. When you're stepping out of your comfort zone, you don't know how to do the things you're doing because they're new to you. You haven't done them before. So it's going to be really uncomfortable. And it is going to be more stressful for a certain period of time. It is, you are going to be sort of lost at times, like, what am I doing? Am I sure this is worth it? You're going to want to quit sometimes too, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're on some kind of personal development journey where you're really going out of your comfort zone and doing new things that are different for you. There are going to be so many times where you want to quit because it will be so easy to go back to the way things were before because you know how to do those things. But if you really are true to yourself and realize, okay, my long-term goals are worth it for me, I do want to eventually achieve this, then just knowing where you're going can help you go through that process.
Yeah.
Because if you lose focus of this is what I want to achieve, it's so easy to go back and do what you've always done.
And you cannot expect people to understand where you're going or why you're doing what you're doing, because in that moment, you have no clue.
It's even possible to lose sight of what you're doing yourself. Like, for example, for me, part of what happened today is I kind of realized that I didn't have a full understanding of what happened, what transpired, and how I had acted, and how that actually worked. I mean, it's vehemently, it's like super clear that I've leveled up, but I perceived the technique and the method that I used as not being like the greatest way.
It's not smooth.
And
it's never smooth.
So what I learned is you really have to solicit a reflection or an opinion from people, and sometimes it's not always obvious who to get those opinions or reflections from.
Yeah.
So when you feel like, okay, maybe I did achieve the goal, but I didn't do it so well, or maybe I didn't achieve this goal, blah, 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 reach out to people that you've been friends with for a long time, and people that you haven't been friends with for a long time, and really ask them, what do you think about this? Or maybe I didn't do this way. Share your opinion with them, and they'll give you their feedback. And so sometimes I feel like, okay, I've done a little bit, but I still feel like I'm underachieving and blah blah blah. And not only Jannik, but my friend Kyle was like, no, children don't do like I feel like a child a lot of the time in a grown man's body. But my friend Kyle told me once, he said, children don't pay off big debts to the government really quickly. and then move to Mexico for a job that they haven't studied for, but they're basically really good at. With the exception of today's podcast, because the audio and video is totally out of sync, and I don't know why. Because we all still make mistakes. But you do have to solicit that feedback from people, and solicit as much feedback as you can, and that'll have the added benefit of quantifying your friendships, because people that really know you and really care have thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you what the reality rather than what they think you want to hear.
Or talking from their own insecurities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about this a lot in development. It's whenever you are an entrepreneur for the first time, or second, third, fifth time, whenever you're a parent for the first time, whenever you start any project for that people around you have an opinion about, they're going to weigh in. And the reality is there's a lot of noise. And exactly knowing who to get that feedback from is very difficult, because everyone has an opinion, and how do you weigh and how do you decide whose opinion is most important? And what we generally say is you can listen to everyone, you can learn from everyone, but you have to ask yourself, is this coming from their insecurities, from their own context, from their own goals, or are they taking into consideration my goals, my context,
Exactly.
my situation?
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Another thing is, are they trying to tear me down because of their insecurities to keep me at their level so I don't abandon them? Or are they trying to push me always to be greater, to grow, to evolve? A good friend should have the same mentality as a good parent. The mentality of being obsolete, in the sense that not generating dependencies, but creating a good enough experience that they want to spend time with you because they want to spend time with you, not because they depend on you, right? So they should push you, they should challenge you, they should help you grow. And I think if you have friends that you know, they always are there to help you go, and they will tell you honestly what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, but they also will at the same time be a cheerleader for you. That's important. And you gotta find people who have that balance, not people who are gonna be critical and everything, even though they mean well. Those are valuable too, and you should have those friends, but you got to make sure to have a healthy amount of friends who, or a healthy amount of contact with friends that are good at making you feel good about yourself, motivating you, seeing both where you need to work on and where you need to, what you need to celebrate. And I think, for example, with us, we're very good at both being critical when we need to be critical, but also celebrating when we need to celebrate. And I think that balance is also key.
You need somebody to tell you the truth, but not their truth. When they make it's my truth, this is the way it should be. When they complain more than they praise.
I've never been guilty of that.
Never. We never fall into
Never.
that. It's other people that do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You have to start looking. Okay, where are their insecurities? And take it with a pinch of salt, as they say. No.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's not about judging those people and labeling them as, oh, they're terrible people because of they have that insecurity, or because they try to bring me down. It's looking at how do you receive their feedback. Because if you realize somebody's giving you feedback from a place of insecurity, from a place of wanting you to not make the mistakes they felt they make, or wanting you to not abandon them. You know, a lot of people will not want you to be successful for fear that you will forget about them, things like that. If you realize they're coming from a place like that, just be compassionate with them, and, you know, don't stop moving forward, don't stop evolving because of it, but also don't go like, oh, terrible person, I'll never talk to you again. Because those people, they're going through their own process. They might evolve too. They might be saying those things and at the same time hearing themselves. You know, I think we've all had moments where we said something out of insecurity
Yeah.
and then heard ourselves and be like, oops, okay. and we
get reminded of what we said, and we're like, I wouldn't have said that. There's no way I said that.
Yeah, so we have to allow people their process of growth too. It's not one person makes one mistake and they're out of the picture completely. Yes, eventually, if you see a pattern of over time that somebody doesn't evolve and they really resist evolving, chronically, then yes, you can put certain distance. But I think there's a bit of a trap sometimes.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, burning or building bridges. I mean, we talk in developed development more about not burning bridges prematurely, building bridges, uplifting people, being empathetic with people's context, their insecurities, and understanding that most of the nasty things people do to you are because they have their insecurities, they have their traumas, and that doesn't mean that you should accept or tolerate abuse, but it also, you shouldn't make it as personal about you, and understand that's their situation, and while it does affect you, don't amplify it and don't make it like, oh, it was me. Like, we're very good at sometimes doing that, so we have to reflect at all of that as well.
And creating noticing when you are creating or in a codependency, because many of your friends probably had a codependent relationship with you, and breaking through that allows them to grow. I remember one of the biggest changes Itzel and I made when we were studying Develop Your Element. No, when we
started with personal development.
When we started with personal development. At the time, sometimes we're about 14 people to 20 people living in our house. All teenagers, all going through their stuff. And after one of the classes we took, everybody started becoming independent. And before that, I wanted to be the perfect mother. When I allowed myself to be the worst mother in the world, I remember one of the girls got a scholarship and moved away. Other kids that would spend a lot of time with us started moving. And within months, or weeks, you two moved to a different side of Canada. And Itzel, who never spoke, who had never taken public transport, who hardly had jobs because of her insecurities, her shyness, her anxieties, etc., suddenly decided to go to Japan for a concert, and she had found the money. And suddenly, from having a house full of people, we were alone, my ex-husband and I, and it was a huge house, and we were alone, and we didn't even know how to cook for ourselves. And my instinct could have been, oh, stay with me. It's easier here. I'll make it easier, more comfortable even. And for me, it was the best thing that could happen when all of you moved away. Interestingly enough, 7 years later, some of you have moved back. We don't live in the same home, some of us, but we live in
the same building.
The
same building.
Condo complex.
Exactly. So, and that's amazing. That's you chose to come back, and I chose to come back. I mean, we all chose. Actually, Jannik was the center. He was living here, and
everyone invaded. I found a good thing here, and everyone was like, "I want to be part of it." So
that's what he says. But he messaged all of us and was like,
"Okay,
hey,
so I may have recruited them very actively,
but you want to join?
Live your life, live your success. Come on and help me. Or join this crazy
as Steve said, one day I told Steve, I have a plan for you. When you're ready.
At that point, it was like, okay, I can let go of the negative things and start cutting out. Because sometimes you need to burn a bridge. Sometimes you really need to burn a bridge. And it's not always clear which bridges you need to burn until you get... imagine like in a video game where you have like that little circle map and you can only see a certain radius around your character. But as you progress throughout the map, you can see, okay... well, I've got enemies or bad influences coming from this side, so I'm not going to go in that direction. And, okay, at that point, it's probably okay to burn that bridge because you can see that you have other bridges ahead of you that are not just easier to cross, but more beneficial to get across.
Yeah. And it's amazing. When you're getting out of your comfort zone, all the bridges will seem burning. Everybody will seem upset. Everything will seem to be falling apart. And I sometimes feel like Mission Impossible, where everything is breaking behind me and I know, okay, the least resistance or the least awful place is this one. This is the one I'm going to take, till I have more clarity, till I have to stop running. But I won't stop running, and I won't stop going through.
I mean, talking video game references, the higher level you get, the higher the difficulty becomes. But yes, also hopefully your skills improve over time, your defenses increase over time, depending on the game. You might have more abilities, you might have more armor, you might have more weapons, whatever, if we are talking literally video games. But in the context of your life, yes, as you progress, things will become more complex, more difficult, more challenging. But you should also have more skill sets, more experience, more resilience, more patience, more mental clarity, more confidence. And sure, that's not always, it's never linear. I mean, sometimes there's ups and downs and twists and turns and valleys. And you do have to embrace that process and just understand, okay, this just means things are about to get better. If you don't let those moments defeat you. But as in a video game, as with a video game, you can choose to give up. You can get overwhelmed, or you can practice. You can explore other approaches, other strategies, and you can navigate it and approach it differently. And in life, it's very much like that. It's very much like that. That the higher level you get, the more intricate things get, the more complicated things get. But and this is something important, because sometimes in personal development they talk about, you should do whatever is super easy, super light, super no resistance, but
go with the flow,
etc., etc.
And where is the flow taking you?
Yeah, there might be a river that's heading towards a waterfall that might be a humongous drop and take you to a place of the jungle that you don't want to be in. So like, you have to be aware that sometimes you have to go through those difficult experiences. You have to go against the stream. You have to go sometimes in where there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of rejection. And if you have your goals defined enough, you have good ethics, you have good values, good morals, and you are inclusive in your process, then it will probably pay off.
And a lot of times you'll see like picture shared on Facebook or whatever social media you guys pay attention to. You'll see a little character pushing a boulder up a hill.
Yeah.
But the thing about hills is they have a top. And once you get to the top of that hill, that's probably not the biggest hill you're ever going to face in your life. And sometimes after ascending, you have to descend a little bit, or there's a little bit of... I'm just trying to say it's not always pushing a rock up a hill. That is difficult, pushing a rock up a hill, and that's a very good metaphor for facing challenges. But getting the rock down the hill, that boulder that you pushed up the hill has to go down a bit so that you can reach the next hill, if that makes any sense. And if you're not careful, you can go down very fast. So it's difficult to get up and to ascend, but it's also difficult to control your descent. And sometimes you just have to make sure that, okay, while I've gotten to this step, now I have to not focus on this specific goal or task as much because I have other things I want to achieve. That is essentially controlling the rock going down the hill. But if you don't control it and you don't hold on to it, it's going to go too far, too fast, and then things are going to get out of control. And you want to be able to have control over that rock so that you can start pushing it back up the next hill.
And remember, there's a pause button. And if you haven't watched our other podcasts, watch the one about regeneration. You have the chance every day to take at least 5 minutes pause button to regenerate. Because when you have full battery, you will deal with anything that presents to you in a much better way, with more mental clarity, with more flexibility. So your pause button should be regeneration time.
Yeah, no, it's, sometimes you will have to kind of stop. Like, it's easy to get into the mentality of constant growth. And
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm very happy because ever since we started the podcast, I've been trying to get him more and more on the podcast. And the last 2 episodes, he has joined and contributed a lot of value, a lot of context, and really taken the conversation to very interesting directions. So, yeah, hopefully we'll see more and more of him.
Yeah, it's very exciting. What was I saying?
You're saying something very intelligent, something very, very useful for our audience.
Something about
And if you forget it, the audience is going to hate you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No pressure.
I'm so sorry. No, yeah, sometimes you will take certain breaks along the way.
Yeah, the importance of regeneration and pressing the pause button.
I think I had two ideas in my head, and that's why I'm a little confused. But yeah, like sometimes you're going to take certain breaks. Sometimes you're even going to go backwards a little bit because you're going to go back for certain resources. Some ways in which it could show up is maybe going back to school or studying something, moving back home at a period of time where that's is a good step for you.
If you have the option, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but it's a very good point. You got to eliminate ego. Because if you are trying to keep up with the Joneses and make sure you have the as good a car, as good a house, as good a thing as, or better than the people around you, then you're gonna waste your resources. If you have a good relationship with your parents, if you have the ability to move back home, cut your expenses, automatically increase your resources, that is very valuable for a lot of people. And yes, it's like, it's emasculating. I have to go through a period of discomfort and judgment. I'm an adult man. I shouldn't do this. But if you are willing to go through that and eliminate that ego, wow, that can lead you to a lot of things. It can give you that period of restructuring. I mean, and this is something that a lot of people are now talking about. If you listen to Gary Vee on his podcast and on his Instagram videos, he talks a lot about that. Also, he talks about eliminate your ego, and if you can, sell your house, move back with your parents if you have that ability, if you have parents that you get along with. For your parents, it might be a gift, and for you, it might also be a gift. Obviously, it depends on your context, but it is something valuable that sometimes you have to go back, exactly as you say, take back a step and do things that people are going to be like, oh, poor you. Oh, it's going to get better. Oh, and they're going to pity you, and you shouldn't pity yourself. You should be like, I'm on a mission, and trust me, this phase right now, you're flexing, but I'm going to have the last laugh.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was talking about. Sometimes we get so into this mentality of always making progress and always moving forward, which on a greater scale, I believe in. On a greater scale, I do believe that we should be in constant evolution, but sometimes part of that evolution means allowing yourself to take certain steps backwards, to build certain skill sets, to gather certain resources, to develop certain things. I mean, we've done that in Develop Your Element. We had a point where, we were doing really well in certain ways, but we didn't have the infrastructure. So we had to take a few steps back, build up the infrastructure. And yes, it looked like we were going backwards for a while. We were earning less money for a while. We were,
giving less classes,
less people in our classes because we were so focused on other things.
It's like a catapult. It's like a catapult, or Steve, what do you call those, like
Slingshots?
Slingshots. So slingshots, catapults. I mean, a lot of different weapons, but that shows how physics work. It's like you gotta sometimes go backwards to be able to get the momentum to go forwards.
A more positive example would be how NASA will fly a spaceship around a planet to then break away from its gravity and slingshot further out into space.
Exactly. For me, life is like a dance. It's not always a step forward that is the nicest, or the one that follows the rhythm. You do have to follow the rhythm, and sometimes you will have to turn around to be able to see the other options. If you are just going straight forward, you don't see the other options. And that's why the pause button is important, because sometimes you have to look around. Maybe there's another option you hadn't considered because you were so focused going forward. So that when you take time to regenerate, it's very important. I want to talk about ego. And I remember when we moved to the apartments we have now, they were so much nicer. They were like our dream apartments. The views we have of the volcanoes, the place where it is. We really were so happy. And I remember the first night or the second night, moving had also been a huge endeavor.
moving one apartment into 2 different apartments without organizing things in the trucks. So it was like, okay, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. No, wait, this is on the wrong side. Bring it over here.
And I was teaching at a different side of the city, and so one of the team members had to come, and I was signing contracts. And as soon as it was signed, we had to photograph it so the movers could start taking the things into the apartment before they would close and things like that. And I remember we were watching the view and feeling so successful. And we didn't have to show anybody what we had achieved.
Yeah.
We didn't have to show off. We were like, wow, this is cool. We have reached a place in our lives where we don't have to show anybody, no family member, no friend, nobody where we are living, what we have achieved. This is for ourselves.
It's a beautiful thing because yes, there are going to be times where out of excitement, you're going to share a lot of your successes.
Absolutely.
But if you're noticing that every success you have to share it in order to feel that it's valid, then that's one clue that there might be certain insecurities involved where you're seeking other people's approval. Because ideally, there's going to be some kind of balance between moments where you're just so excited that you're going to share a lot and other times where you're just so happy that you're going to enjoy it and you're going to forget about social media. You're going to forget about other people's opinions.
A good example is this. I mean, you've probably seen articles about this. It's kind of a famous narrative right now. And there's certainly some truth to it. Obviously, you have to consider context and personalities, but I definitely see a certain trend. That people who are in a bad relationship sometimes will post a lot of very happy posts on social media to get that stimulus, to get that validation externally, because they're not getting enough internally within the relationship. So there are certainly more extroverted people. There are certain people who naturally are oversharers. I mean, I'm a person who in the general context of my life, I'm not a very private person at all. I have no secret. You ask me any question, I will answer it very openly. And I like GIF or GIF. GIF. Yeah. So
the common word.
So GIF or GIF. That was a very good one. But you have to be aware of that sometimes when you get to a certain level of confidence, exactly, you're not going to be flexing as much. You're going to not be showing off as much. Some personalities will show off more than others. There are some personalities where that's part of what really drives them and excites them. But also there's a difference between celebrating success and flexing because of lack of confidence, right? But certainly there's something to be said about that, because I have seen very clearly, and we also saw here on the team, I think the people that saw the biggest level up, that saw the biggest change in reality were obviously the first ones to kind of want to share more of this, want to show off. And the people who kind of had more of a, this is a logical continuation, a logical evolution. This is where we're going. And they had it kind of more mentally planned. They didn't show it off as much.
No.
I remember some of the people who had the kind of biggest upgrade in that moment were like, why haven't you posted pictures of the apartment yet? And it's a spectacular, we have a spectacular view. And people were like, why haven't you shown off yet? When we bought the Cadillac, why haven't you shown off yet? I did end up putting one post of the Cadillac Escalade on Instagram. But a few years ago, I remember when I bought my first car, I was showing that off in 100 million different posts in 100 different forums, on 100 different groups on Facebook, on 100. It was everywhere. Pictures every day with different outfits every day. I would do a modification and show it off. And now it's like I have a brand new Cadillac Escalade. Well, brand new, used, but still a very cool looking Cadillac Escalade. And I'm not showing it off the way I did when I had less confidence. Now it's like it's a logical investment. We needed a bigger car that can move more people, and the smaller cars, the smaller SUVs and vans and trucks weren't comfortable in the back seat. The whole team voted for it. Okay, it makes sense. But had this been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have been showing that off everywhere. But now I feel I get enough kind of stimulus from my day to day that I don't need to seek that external validation.
Yeah.
And I think another thing we have developed much more is gratitude. It's something we have always had in our family, but taking moments of gratitude at every step, whether it's good or bad, finding the moment to have gratitude is amazing. So somebody's joking there.
No, Steve, with the Develop Development account, he commented in the chat, the official stance of Develop Development is GIF is with a hard G. It's a big conversation. Even Obama agrees with it being a hard G, but I mean, it's a big discussion online.
How do you
and
pronounce
how
it?
do you pronounce whether it's GIF or GIF?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I also
These
say
are the
GIF.
important questions.
These
I
are the
mean,
important questions we should ask our instructors when they're in their training period, whether it's a soft
it
G
should
or
be
hard
in
G.
it should be the
and
first
it's going to be the
question.
deciding factor. It's gonna
In
be the
interviews, it should be the first question.
Well, you don't give Christmas gifts.
You don't give Christmas gifts. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
You don't.
I
No?
would say no. So anyway, including gratitude, and maybe we should have a program on that. It's something if you use it every day, no matter whether it's a good day or a bad day, if you take some time to have gratitude, to recognize others and to recognize your own achievements, even if it's just surviving for the day sometimes.
No, and talking
it's
about
very
gratitude, I think gratitude is a byproduct of being self-aware and being empathetic.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to have true gratitude without being self-aware and without being empathetic.
Yeah.
Because you got to understand yourself and you got to understand others. And if you understand how you function, what you need, what your instincts are, but you also understand what other people's processes are, other people's instincts are, then you'll be able to receive with open arms acts of kindness and generosity from people who will provide it in a way that's very different from your context and your instincts. So definitely work on your self-awareness, work on your empathy, because that will help you become much more grateful and appreciative of all the people around you, all their contributions and all their choices, even if you don't agree with them in the moment, even if you have a different instinct, it will make everything so much more positive.
Yeah.
No, and when you greet people with gratitude, they can sense it.
Yeah.
You don't have those barriers, and you're not so defensive, Yeah. You're okay. This is your process. You're going through that process, but I'm still grateful for you. Or not still, because that will make it less, but I am grateful for you.
Yeah, and giving yourself that too, because it's all of us are so good at judging ourselves. We're so good at criticizing ourselves. We're so good at setting really extreme expectations for ourselves. And being able to be grateful for the things we have done for ourselves, whether it's survive a difficult day, whether it's step out of our comfort zone, whether it's set aside our ego when we need to take a step back to gather some resources. We've talked about this a little bit in other programs, but sometimes we just have such defined measures of success for ourselves that we don't appreciate all the other things we're doing that are actually leading us to a more successful and happy life. So yes, definitely being able to take some time consciously and actively to reflect on those things can be very positive as a regenerative experience, as a motivating experience, as a, even if you're not into wellness in and of itself, realizing that your wellness affects other more tangible measures of success, if only for that reason, give yourself that sometimes.
Thank you for listening to us, because it's not only listening to us, it means that you are wanting to change your life,
You're investing in yourself.
Invest in yourself. So please recognize that, because we wouldn't be here if you didn't exist, even if we might not know you. But the beautiful thing is that you are looking for something new, a way to change your reality, a way to improve your life. So please recognize that.
When it comes to personal development, I don't agree with a lot of things that are done and a lot of different techniques, a lot of different coaches. I can be very critical about a lot of practices in the industry. But one thing I know for sure is when someone chooses to invest in themselves, chooses to seek information, educate themselves on possibilities, invest in themselves, give them enough importance, that's something very powerful in and of itself. No matter where they find the information, no matter what tools they seek, just that choice that they make changes everything. But
Yeah.
yes, I think today's episode we have covered a lot of different stuff, and I mean we can go on for hours, but I think this is a very good a wrap-up point to wrap up with gratitude. Gratitude for you guys, the listeners, gratitude for our team, and I mean, start reflecting on these things, because your life will get so much better the moment you start thinking about your short-term goals, your long-term goals, your fears, your insecurities, your context, other people's context, your personality, other people's personalities. How can you get to where you want to be without doing stupid sacrifices, but also sometimes making necessary sacrifices? So, yes, thank you very much once again for tuning in, and we'll see you same time, same place next week. Have a good one, and don't
Bye.
forget to ring the bell, subscribe and ring the bell if you're watching us live on YouTube. Cheers.